Okay, and we are live on YouTube.
Good morning and welcome to the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting of February 1st, 2022. We'll start by taking the attendance. Mark, will you call the roll?
Chair Carroll.
Here.
Commissioner Vice Chair Bland.
Here.
Commissioner Samir Barron.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin.
Here.
Commissioner Chen. Commissioner Devonshire.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Here.
Commissioner Gustafson. Commissioner Jefferson.
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Here.
So good morning and welcome to the February 1st public hearing and public meeting. Today, this meeting is being held via Zoom and live streamed on our YouTube channel. And we will start the agenda with a public meeting item. I think we have modified our schedule. One of the public meeting items has been dropped off and I think will be rescheduled at a future date. So we'll have one public meeting item, which is an item that has already had a public hearing and is back today in response to comments by the commissioners at the public hearing. And then we will move to our public hearing agenda, which is also relatively short today. So with that, I will turn it over to our Director of Preservation, Corey Harala, to take us through the agenda.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everybody. We'll start today's Preservation Department agenda with public meeting item number 1, LPC 22-01335, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 150, Lot 12, 78 Reed Street, aka 177 Church Street in the Tribeca South Historic District. This is an Italianate style store and loft building designed by James H. Giles and built in 1860 to 61. The application is to install storefront infill and signage. And this was last presented at the public hearing of November 9th, 2021, and no action was taken at that time. The staff will do an introduction and the applicant will be available for questions after we open the proceedings.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and open the proceedings now, just in case the applicant does need to speak, we can do that seamlessly. So Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so if the applicants need to answer any questions, they'll be able to do so once the staff has presented the revised proposal.
Morning, Commissioners. Mishael Shabrami of the Preservation staff. The application before you at 78 Reed Street originally came forward at the November 9th, 2021 public hearing. The proposal was to remove the steps and masonry within the bays, enlarging the openings and creating an at-grade entrance. Replace the storefront infill with metal and glass infill and signage, including display windows, transoms, paneled bulkheads, mechanical louvers with decorative grills, and 3 signs. At that time, the Commission expressed a consensus of support for the overall proposal, but indicated concerns about the proportions, material, and details of the proposed metal infill, the proposed finishes, and the amount of signage. They recommended exploring modifying the storefront infill proportions, particularly at the bulkheads, revising the storefront materials and details, changing the finishes to have less of a contrast and be more typical, and reducing the number of signs. The applicants have revised their design as shown on the right to feature wood at the doors, display windows and transoms, and metal at the paneled bulkheads, modifying the proportions of the storefront infill, as well as reducing the signage to 1 central sign with 1 or 2 lines of text above the door, and painting the infill a darker gray paint finish than previously proposed. The architect Robert Bianco of Sherida Paulson Architects is here if there are questions.
All right, thank you, Michelle. And the signage has been reduced and located in the center bay, correct?
Correct.
And it's metal letters sitting on a bar at the transom
Correct.
bar. Correct. Okay.
Michelle, could you
Commissioners,
also just clarify that these two images are both the proposed version with two variations on the signage, and we're
Yes.
not actually seeing the prior scheme here?
That's correct.
Okay, so
Okay.
the prior scheme included shorter bulkheads, a more contrasting set of colors between the cast iron and the infill, and then signage in each of the three bays.
Yes, which is on the first slide, I believe, if we want to look at that.
maybe Michelle, you could just flip back quickly since they're not side by side,
Okay.
just so everybody has a quick image, and then go back to the last slide.
Sure. Okay. Oops.
Okay, oops. Actually, that does it. So at the top right is what was previously proposed, and the bottom two are the revised proposal. For
Correct.
the. Okay, commissioners, do we have any questions? Not seeing any questions. Okay. So I think if there are no questions, we're ready to move to our discussion. So, as Michelle said, at the last public hearing, I think almost everyone agreed that the signage should be reduced and because it was in all three bays. And many felt that the bulkhead should be taller. Many also suggested that the colors be restudied so that there would be less of a contrast between the cast iron and the infill. And then there were also comments about the framing details, and some felt that they should be wood, some felt that they could be aluminum, but with better details. And so the applicant is now proposing wood, except at the base, which will be between the two cast iron column bases on either side. Commissioner Shamir Baran, I think you actually specifically asked for the bulkhead to be raised in height. You were comfortable with aluminum if the details were better resolved. So how are you feeling now?
I think this is much improved on the signage as well, despite the fact that the bulkhead's not exactly as I imagined it might be. I think it is better, and the wood is also an improvement. So I can find this appropriate and approvable.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Commissioner Holford Smith, I think you also had concerns about the contrasting colors. And for you, I think you felt that the wood would actually have better profiles and details. So
Yes, yeah, I think that they've addressed those concerns. I think the wood is much more appropriate and just looks more appropriate for this location. I think I can approve this, but I would ask that they continue to work with staff on the details. For instance, the detail at the metal base, the sill. I think they could use a little more detail and maybe some profiles of the wood, but otherwise I think this is acceptable.
okay. Commissioner Chapin?
I think in general, it is very much improved and approvable as a result. The central sign, the individual sign, seems rather tall to me, but the other one seems fine. And given the kind of signage that exists on most of the buildings around there, this is an improvement. So I think I can just approve it as presented.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree, it's appropriate as shown.
Commissioner Devonshire?
It's appropriate.
Commissioner Bland?
Appropriate.
And Commissioner Jefferson?
Appropriate.
Okay, all right, great. So I think we have enough to approve this today. Commissioner Shamir Baran, would you make the motion?
Yes. In the matter of LPC 2201335, 78 Reed Street, aka 177 Church Street, Tribeca South Historic District, an Italianate style store and loft building designed by James H. Giles and built in 1860 to 1861. The application is to install storefront infill and signage. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Tribeca South Historic District, and I recommend approval. Finding that the replacement of the simply designed historic elevator doors, masonry steps, and bulkhead and the modern infill will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the replacement of the remaining historic wood storefront components is warranted by their deteriorated and altered condition, that the proposed alterations to create an at-grade entrance will help provide barriers for access to the storefront. The proposed wood and glass entrance doors, display windows, and transoms will be in keeping with storefront components historically found at buildings of this type, style, and age in terms of materials, proportions, composition, details, and finish, that the metal bulkheads will be well scaled to the wood and glass infill, and also recall metal steps and loading dock, which were sometimes historically found at buildings of this type, style, and age in terms of placement, size, materials, and details, thereby helping them to remain a harmonious, well-integrated element. That the proposed decorative screen fronting louvers in transom will be uniform in design and feature a repeated pattern that is well scaled to the storefront, evoking the types of decorative elements sometimes found at transoms of storefronts at buildings of this age and type. That the letters will be non-illuminated and typical in terms of placement, material, and finish, and limited to a single bay, and will therefore be subordinate to and harmonious with the building and streetscape. And that the limit of 24 inches in height for 1 or 2 rows of letters will help the signage to remain well scaled to the storefront, and that the applicants will continue to work with staff to refine the details.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, so that's approved. Thank you.
Thank
Please.
you. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we'll move to the public hearing agenda now.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. And just again, to note one more time, public meeting item number 2 is being laid over and will be rescheduled for a future date. That was 134 Spring Street. So now we'll move to public hearing item number 1, LPC 22-03940, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 276, Lot 20, 175 Clinton Street in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. This is a Greek Revival style row house built in 1840 to 49, altered in 1870 with eclectic details. The application is to replace windows, install a balcony, and alter the rooftop, rear extension, and rear facade.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. You just need to click on your screen and unmute yourself. There you go. And then you can advance the slides. State your name for the record, and you may begin.
Thank you. I'm Margot Otten from Oso Architecture. To get started, this is a map of Brooklyn Heights Historic District. The little red rectangle here is our site. It's close to the intersection of Clinton and Atlantic. One lot off of the corner where there's a Key Foods on the corner of Clinton and Atlantic, and a couple of other similar Greek Revival style row houses towards State Street. This is the 1922 historic photo. This is our site right here. And this is an older building on the corner that's no longer there. When you zoom in on the photo, we can see some of the Anglo-Italianate detailing that was added in a 1870 renovation, as well as the mansard roof up at the top. The bay window was also added, and in this image seems to have plywood in the windows. This is the 1940 tax photo, very similar detailing to what we saw in 1922. And then we have a comparison of 1940, 1958, and 1980. And these images show how it was originally a 5-family and single commercial space, which was always used as a laundrette on the bottom level. And in the 1980 photo, you'll see the windows were replaced, as was the paint colors of the trim work on the facade were changed to white. And here's a photo of the existing building. showing we still have the same windows from the 1980s alteration, same bay window configuration. And this is the key food on the corner here. And here's a shot of the entire block here. So these are the other Greek Revival homes next to us. Running through the floor plans, we have a cellar, and then we're proposing a duplex apartment and 3 single-family apartments above that. So the duplex would be on the garden parlor level, and then we have a couple of apartments above that. And this is the roof plan where we're proposing a couple of added skylights. So in the front facade, this is the demolition elevation and proposed. So in the demolition elevation, you'll see we're replacing all of the windows, including the bay windows. And we're going back to what we see in the historic images. So double hung windows at the top 3 floors. And then at the bay window, we're restoring the divisions that we see in the historic photos. And down at the garden level, it was a commercial space before. And so we're planning to divide the windows in a more appropriate residential manner. One thing to note is the details and division of this level of the bay window. We're still working together with Landmark staff to determine the most appropriate division for these windows so that it's harmonious with the building overall. And here are just a couple snapshots of that bay window going back to 1922, 1940, and then a rendering of our proposed divisions. This is an overall rendering of the building of our proposed design. We initially were proposing keeping the white painted trim work, white cornice and white door surround. And after we got a lot of helpful feedback from the community board and the Brooklyn Heights Association, we looked through a couple of alternate color schemes and found that we thought that a darker gray paint color up at the cornice and the elements in the mansard roof felt more grand and more appropriate and more classic, and then a brownstone color for the trim work around the windows and the door surround. On the back facade, you'll see this this area up here at the rooftop. This in the existing building is actually part of the top apartment. The roof slopes back so much towards the rear that the room in the back is only 3 foot high. So it's really very unusable space from here back. And so we're proposing to carve off the roof just in that section at the back to create an outdoor terrace, which will allow it to be more usable space while maintaining the perimeter of the building so that it still appears as if it's an enclosed space from the public thoroughfares. On the floor below, we're proposing the addition of a small balcony that's very similar to the fire escapes that are currently on this building and others in this area. This is an existing addition here, and so we're proposing to renovate the existing terrace, add a few skylights for the parlor level, which is very long and very dark space, and then down at the parlor level, open up the existing facade for larger sliding doors leading out to a new terrace and a stair down to the garden. This is another view from the other angle. A view of the side of the building from Atlantic. There are current lot line windows, and we're adding windows that are all in compliance and are being approved at staff level with landmarks. This is an image of the existing rear facade, not in great shape, but we are planning to keep the existing brickwork of the rear extension. So the dentils here will be keeping and painting this part of the back of the facade and replacing the box cornice here to match existing. And then you can see up here, the balcony that aesthetically is very similar to the fire escapes that you see here and on the other buildings. The balcony is something we found was really important, especially with COVID and New Yorkers living in such small apartments. We found it's design-wise really valuable for people's mental health to have just a little bit of outdoor space. Up at the top here, these will remain as the same openings as the existing. The existing windows are sliding windows that were not original. So we worked with the staff at Landmarks to find what was most commonly installed in the Greek Revival style in these smaller upper windows. It was typically more a 3-light configuration. So we'll have those 3, and this is actually basically a parapet for the terrace behind, but will appear the same from the back. These are the elevations of the rear, the demolition elevation here, and proposed. An aerial giving you some more context. Again, this is the Key Foods on the corner, Clinton, and this is Atlantic here. The views from the public thoroughfares there are 2. There's one looking this way across Atlantic, and then another through a break in the street wall over on State Street, which is right here. So these 2 are views from Atlantic. So you can see how the top 2 floors are visible. And then this is the view over from State Street through that break in the window wall, and you see the top 2 floors, and a little bit of the existing terrace is visible. And you can also see the painted steel fire escapes that are very common on the backs of these facades. And this is a view of our proposed design. So you see the 3 windows here, and then this is the balcony that appears very similar to the fire escapes. And the terrace up here, you can see is that no part of the terrace is actually visible because we're maintaining this perimeter wall. And we have a couple of example projects that we're going to show. So this is 160 State Street, which is actually visible through the rear yard of our site. And they've replaced windows and opened up the back of the parlor level to a terrace that leads to the garden. This project is 109 State Street. These over on the left are existing, and on the right here are proposed. And they've done opening up of the rear facade, renovation of a terrace, and a balcony leading to the garden, similar to what we're proposing. This project is 370 Adelphi Street. They also have opened up the rear facade, added a balcony, and renovated the terrace up here. This project is 410 to 412 Waverly in the Clinton Hill Historic District. And this project has a very similar exterior deck that's been kind of carved out of the roof space. And then lastly, these are a couple of images of small painted steel balconies that are done in a similar style to the fire escapes in this part of Brooklyn. And I will leave you with an image of, let's see, the proposed design. And I wanted to thank everyone at the community board for the feedback on the color scheme and everything else. And we're excited to move forward with renovating this beautiful building.
Okay, thank you very much. And we do have at least one question. Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead.
Thank you. If you go to the view from Atlantic Avenue, you see the profile that you could go back to the one, you see the profile of the edge condition?
Yes.
You're eliminating that, correct? In your proposal?
No, we're maintaining it. We're maintaining the
But if you go to your axonometric drawings, that one, I don't see it.
Yeah, that's misrepresented. I apologize. We're planning to keep the chimney. Actually, has recently been removed because there was a violation because because of some structural issues, but the profile here we were planning to maintain.
And the same thing on the other side? I can't see the profile on the other side. Is it the same profile? There's no.
The other side, it's right up against another row house.
Okay, but it's okay. All right. So you're keeping that profile.
We're keeping that. We're planning to keep that profile.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I was interested since you're, you're trying to do a nice historic restoration. Did you do any paint samples on either the mansard or the bay or anything? You were talking about the community wanting it to be dark, but if you look at the 1922 or so illustrations, it looks like everything was really actually more of a brownstone color or something. So it looks like it maybe it wasn't painted at all. I don't know whether it was painted or it wasn't, but it doesn't look like it was either light nor was it dark.
Yeah.
So just comment at that whole kind of concept there, if you would.
Sure. It's a little bit hard for us to tell from these images, but in some of them, it appears like the bay window is a little bit darker than the brick tone, which is how this originally came up. And if we look at the panorama of the block, let me go back to that. Here it is. A lot of the buildings in the neighborhood have a darker cornice, and ones that do have a mansard roof, the cornice and the detailing around the windows are often a darker expression. So the roof reads as one element, and the street wall below that reads as another element. And so what we were going for was something similar to what you see in this row house with the brownstone coloring here, and then darker from the cornice above. And some of the feedback that we got on the white color, keeping the white color, was that, this was originally Greek Revival. It's a very eclectic change that they made in 1870 with adding the Italianate detailing. And some of the comments that we got was that the white, it really accentuates the detailing. It gives it kind of like a wedding cake-like look. And we were advised that, especially in a lot of ironwork that you see on the railings, the black tends to look a little bit more grand and elegant and fade into the fabric of the building, whereas white is a lot more bold and it sticks out when you're looking at the overall elevation of the street.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up by saying that the paint colors are going to be reviewed at staff level under our restoration rules. Typically, as stated, the Greek Revival buildings did have white trim. This building was altered in 1870 with the bay window and the mansard roof. I'm not sure if they came at the same time, but later in the 19th century. And as you move into the later 19th century, we find historically darker colors were used. So I imagine that was behind the community board's recommendation, but nonetheless, that will continue to be reviewed by the staff. So the components before us are the bay window and the configuration of windows within that bay, and then the opening up of the window at the back and the terrace created at the roof and the new balcony. Okay, Commissioner Devonshire?
Yeah, just further to Diana's question, was there a finishes analysis done?
There has not been yet.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions at this moment, so we'll move to public testimony, and we may have questions after that. So if you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Sasha Seeley to take us through the testimony.
Alrighty, thank you. So for my first sign up, I have Judy Stanton from Brooklyn Heights Association. Judy, you should be receiving a request from me to rejoin the meeting as a panelist. All right, Judy, I see that you are in the meeting. Please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Judy Stanton for the Brooklyn Heights Association. We suggest eliminating the third-story balcony. This is the type of addition is almost never seen on the backs of 19th century interior-facing row houses in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. Our district has many examples of terraces on top of extensions or on top of enclosed T-porches as shown in the presentation, but not balconies. We believe that the handful of actual balconies on the backs of houses along the promenade reflect a unique development history given that location, and they're not representative of houses in any other place in this district. With the elimination of the balcony, we think the condensing unit can be relocated to the 4th-story terrace with minimal disruption. We do not think the mechanicals should drive the need for a balcony. For the front facade color palette, we suggested that the applicant work with staff to determine a more rational and historically appropriate plan, taking into account the materials. For example, the historic photos seem to show that the bay window addition was painted a darker color than the door surround. So we're glad to hear that that's continuing to be looked at by the staff. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next, Historic District Council, you'll be receiving a request from me now. Okay, HDC, I see that you are in the meeting. Just please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, Michelle Arblou for the Historic Districts Council. The Historic Districts Council finds the proposed rear facade work to be largely appropriate and in keeping with other rear yard extensions in the district. However, we find the 3rd floor 2-window bay wide cantilevered balcony to be inappropriate. Given the visibility of the rear elevation from Atlantic Avenue, the applicant should be asked to remove this element. HDC would also like to see the bay window on the front facade be restored to its 1922 configuration, as it appears to be more in keeping with the building's late 19th century renovations. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, take a glance over. Paula Vaughn, you'll be receiving a request from me, Paula, to rejoin the meeting as a panelist. Okay, Paul, I see you have accepted my request. Please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes. Okay, Paul, I just need you to unmute your mic. I'm sending you a request. All right.
I don't think I'm in the right area. I'm here to testify about the markers in Harlem.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I guess you raised your hand a bit early, but you're in the right meeting.
I didn't even realize I raised my hand.
Yes, it's okay. No worries. It happens. All right. Let me just take a glance back over and see. And all right, Chair Carroll, I don't see any more hands raised, so I'll hand it back over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And I just want to also note for the record that we received a resolution from Brooklyn Community Board 2 recommending denial of the 3rd-story balcony and approval of the new window and door modifications and the choice of colors. Okay, so I'd like to turn back to the applicant. Ms. Otten, would you like to respond to the comments? I think particularly about the balcony, and I think when you talked about it relating to fire escapes. So maybe you want to drill down a little bit on that. And the window configuration in the bay window, which had been converted to a storefront at one point and has had different layers of configuration. So maybe you can speak a little bit more about your choice there.
Sure. So again, there's an existing a painted steel fire escape on the rear facade. There's also one on the adjacent building and on several that you see on Atlantic. So it's an element that's already there. It's being eliminated, but we would like to install a very small balcony here that would allow some exterior space for the tenants here. If I can, do I have control of the presentation? I don't. if you could switch to the slide that shows the view from Atlantic Avenue, I think it's a few further on in the presentation. This one right here. If you can see in the center image, you see the fire escape right there. And then if you can go a little bit further on in the presentation, we have a proposed image of that right here. You really, I mean, from this view, this view and the view from State Street are really the only places you're going to see that. And I don't see how this visually looks any different than the fire escape on the next building. So we'd like to request that that be considered. And then in terms of the bay window, if you could go a little bit further back in the presentation, there's an image where there's 2 historic photos on the left and our rendering on the right, this one right here. Thank you. So the upper part of the bay window, we're trying to replicate the historic photo as closely as we can. So the divisions on the left and right are 5/5 on the top. And then it's casement windows in each of the window openings on all 3 sides. And then the garden level, since this was a storefront before, it was larger sheets of glass. This space back here in the renovation, it's going to be the bottom level of a duplex apartment. It'll be a master bedroom. And so obviously the storefront configuration is not conducive to like a master bedroom in terms of privacy and functionality. And so we're proposing double hung windows at the bottom that have a 4/4 configuration, which is similar to the center of that bay window. But we are open to working with landmarks at a staff level to make sure that those divisions work a little bit more harmoniously than they do right now in this image. So we're welcoming any comments on that.
All right, so and at the parlor level, you have a multi-light transom to evoke the multi-light transom seen in the tax photo. And then the casement windows, I think it's hard to see in this photo, but they have sort of almost a Queen Anne configuration, right? Where there's a secondary muntin that goes around, at least at the top and the bottom. And is that what's inspiring your configuration?
Exactly, yeah. If it's possible to zoom in on the 1940 photo in the center.
I'm sorry, we can't do that.
Oh, you can't do, okay. So we've zoomed in as closely as we can. And it appears that it is 2 frames within each window opening. And they have, as you said, like the offset horizontals and verticals. And so we're trying to replicate that and the thicknesses as closely as possible.
Okay. All right, thank you. Commissioner Holford-Smith, please go ahead.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you stated this or not, but the existing transom bar, are you keeping the current location of that, or are you modifying its location? It seems like it was changed from the original to be higher than the original, and I just wasn't sure if you were keeping it or not.
Yeah, no, I think it's just the angle that you're viewing down at, but we're keeping the transom at the same level. Actually, the elevations, I think, are on maybe the next page, might illustrate that more clearly. Let's see. Cute.
Yeah, I was just comparing the existing photo to the historic photo, and it appears that the transom bar is not in the original location. That's why.
So that transom is in the same location here. So okay. I think it was just the angle of the rendering.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, other questions? Yes, Commissioner Chapin.
I had a similar question to Commissioner Holford-Smith a bit, but you can see the top of the bay there is represented very differently in the elevation than it is, because they're preserving the wood detailing, and that doesn't appear in that rendering. So I want to assume that this in fact is the reflecting the actual intent, this elevation that we're looking at.
Yeah, we're keeping the wood detailing and the swags that are in the historic photos and in these elevations. That's correct.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Okay, I think we can move to our discussion. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
I second. You're breaking up.
I'm sorry. Okay.
You're breaking up, so I didn't hear.
Sorry. Perfect.
second.
I asked you to second it. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing's closed and we'll begin our discussion. And before us, we have the window configuration at the parlor and basement level of in the bay window on the front facade. The cutting out of the terrace at the roof line, which is not visible from a public way. The removal of the fire escape as technically staff level, but the replacement with a balcony and a door at the third floor, and then enlarging the opening at the second floor, or at the parlor floor, which is adjacent to the wall of the Key Food store and not visible from a public way. So we'll begin that discussion. Commissioner Bland, would you like to start this one as a resident?
Why not, in my hood?
Yes.
Altogether appropriate as shown. The front, I think we've heard a lot about the detailing of the bay, and I trust that will all be worked out, if it's not already worked out completely with staff. It sounds like it is, but I think a little more staff involvement might be required, including the painting scheme. The rear, I think, is to say it's improved, of course, not really our task. It is improved a lot. However, it's also appropriate, including that balcony. I cannot, for the life of me, understand why that's would be deemed inappropriate in this case, given the existence of all that fire escape ironwork that's on the back of the sides. Judy, I think, as I heard, Judy said that the only other balconies like this are on the backs of houses that face the promenade. But I can personally think of several others on Hicks Street and other places in the Heights where these kind of balconies, which have minimal visibility, exist. Not that I need that as a precedent to say this is appropriate, but I'll just point that out. And the rest of this, I think, is all maybe ingenious is too broad a word here, but I think the capturing of the balcony over the terrace on the top is really smart. A 3-foot high space in the back of the room is pretty unusable, so this is a great way of getting some open space for that unit. And otherwise, these changes in the back are no more radical than things that we approve on an ongoing basis. So altogether, I think it's a fine and appropriate solution overall.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
Yeah, I find this very skillfully done, but I have some issues. One of them is the cutting into the roof. And I can understand it's an architectural gesture that's very strong, cutting in. But what do you see from the back? I can approve it here because I don't have any view from the backyard to what I see. But it makes so much sense practically and in terms of living that I can approve it. The balcony, because it looks like a fire escape, is not enough for me. And in the reading of the material, they claim it was a Juliet balcony, which I then went back and tried to find the definition of a Juliet balcony. And I thought that perhaps a Juliet balcony would be best here, but I'm ambivalent about that. I think the rest of it, especially when I was looking at the interior plan, masterfully done. They're very skillful architects, and I can accept this. I think it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Yes, I agree with all the comments so far. I think this is all very appropriate. I too might have preferred if this, and I think that that the balcony at the third story is fine too, in that it kind of resembles the fire escape that's there. But I also thought that it might be, and given the examples that they've shown, better as a shallower, meaning less deep than 5'1", which is the dimension that they've currently described, which seems to me to be a bit wide for what they're trying to achieve here, or deep. But I can actually approve it as it's proposed. I just think it might be better if it was a shallower, less deep balcony.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith?
I think overall this is a very good application. I think that the cutting in of the roof is a really great idea to gain some outdoor space. And I'm okay with the metal balcony in this location. I think I agree with Adi that it could be shallower, but I can accept it the way it is. On the front, I think all their changes will be an improvement. I just ask that they work with staff to get the proportions right on the bay and those ground floor windows. And I would hope that they would do a paint analysis to get the color right.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I'm happy to see this happening in general. I think that I hope that some of the other buildings in the right next door, which have lost their details, might have some restoration in the future if that's possible. So I think it's great in general, and I think the design in the back is really appropriate, and dealing with that situation with the 3 feet, the 3 feet ceiling that can't be used, I think is fine. I think that the little balcony is really not very visible. I mean, given it is visible, but given it's next to that fire escape, I think it doesn't call attention to itself. So I think really I personally can, as Commissioner Bland, approve this as presented.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
Thank you. I agree that it's appropriate as presented. I think it's worth noting, we usually see these townhouse renovations as conversions of multifamilies to single family houses, which is, historically fine, but urbanistically disastrous. And this is a project that maintains the multifamily configuration and does so in a way that is consistent with the historic fabric of the district and of the building, and for that alone, they should be praised, and the developer or owner should be praised as well. And I think that in that light, certainly I think the balcony for me is okay as is, although historically speaking, it would be a little bit better if it were shallower. I think the front bay, it's not correct, those bottom windows, but I think that lack of correctness does not make it inappropriate historically, because as we saw from the photographs, the house itself had waves of renovations, of which the bay window was one, and that in the course of those waves, changes like the mullions and window configuration were part of the package. And I think that this incorrectness is appropriate historically. I think that the back balcony is fine. The back cut-in balcony is fine. I would suggest that they look with staff at the proportions of the lot line windows, which will be very visible. They struck me as being a little bit wide, but if there are good precedents for it, I would certainly accept it as if the staff felt that it was appropriate. I just want to make sure because they are very visible, that they do have the proportions of a lot line window.
Okay, thank you. And again, those are being reviewed pursuant to our rules, but we'll definitely have the staff think about that as they think about them in the context of the rules. Commissioner Devonshire?
My initial response to this was similar to Fred, and the word genius did come across my mind. I think that the approach to that unusable 3-foot space at the rear of the top floor is just excellent. I mean, the other option is raising it, which I hate to see that done. I think this is an excellent project, and oddly, the three samples that were shown, you know, applicants always like to show us examples of other things in the neighborhood to justify what they're doing. The three that were shown are absolute dogs compared to this. I mean, this is really, to me, a fantastic project. I would wish that the applicant would work with the staff and take the time to have a finishes analysis done so the colors on the front could be more appropriately done, but very appropriate. Thank
Okay.
you for this applicant.
Great. Great. Thank you all. Okay, so I think, you know, the finishes and the lot line windows are being reviewed at staff level. So we'll just ask the staff to be, you know, continue to work with the applicant on that. But I think we have a consensus to approve the components that are before us today. So Commissioner Devonshire, would you mind reading the motion?
Not at all. In the matter of 175 Clinton Street in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District, an application to replace windows, install a balcony, alter the rooftop, rear extension, and rear facade, I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural or historic features, that although the configuration of the proposed casement and double hung multi-light window sashes in the bay window will not match the original single pane commercial show windows, it will recall a later historic multi-light configuration that was present in the bay window and will provide operability for the apartments within. That the proposed rear balcony will only be visible from limited vantage points along Atlantic Avenue over the adjacent one-story building and through a break in the street wall on State Street, and will be small in size, simply designed, and will also screen a mechanical unit installed within it. That the proposed balcony will replace an existing non-historic fire escape and will be installed in an area of plain brick masonry, therefore will not result in the loss or concealment of any significant architectural features. That the proposed demolition of a portion of the rear roof to carve out a terrace at the top floor will include retaining the existing rear facade and sidewalls and the roof slope around the alteration, thereby maintaining the expression of the original volume of the building. That the new terrace will not be appreciably visible through the restored attic floor windows at the rear facade. That the proposed alterations to the facade of the existing rear extension will only be minimally visible from a cap in the street wall on State Street, and that the historic brick corbelling and wood cornice that is visible from this vantage point will be maintained, and the work will not diminish the special architectural historic character of the building or the Brooklyn Heights Historic District.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
That's approved. Thank you. And please continue to work with the staff as you refine all of the details. Okay, we'll move to the next item.
The next item is public hearing item number 2, LPC 22-05900, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 554, Lot 1, 770 Broadway in the Noho Historic District. This is a Renaissance Revival style department store building designed by D.H. Burnham and Company and built in 1903 to 07 with an addition built in 1924 to 25. And the application is to install sliding doors at one storefront bay.
Hey, Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. You just need to click on your screen, and then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. You do need to unmute yourself. Perfect. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Kenneth Ruskin of Ruskin Group Architecture and Design. Thank you. I know you're familiar with this building because you recently have been spending time getting an approval, master plan approval for the lower 2 floors. So we're just focusing on one particular bay and on an overall kind of overarching concept here. We're all the materials, the glass, colors, also will match what you've previously approved in the larger master plan scheme. And basically the work that we're doing here is replacing all modern infill is only being touched. There's nothing historical in nature being touched. And Wegmans, who is moving in here, as of course is high traffic as you enter the space and exit. Let's see, you can control the screen. It's not letting me move. There we go. Well, all right, so Wegmans is moving into this space, and the bay in particular we're talking about is located right here on Lafayette facing Astor Place. Some of the historical photos, again, our bay is located here and here. These are the elevations, and the bay in question is right here in this lower left drawing 3. Some photos, I'm sure you're familiar with this building and so forth. Again, our bay is here, here. So some various vantage points. This is kind of a more close-up of it, and the infill that's going to be replaced at that bay. So when we look at the floor plan, just to kind of focus in, we're looking at this location here and where the new sliding automatic door is being put in. The doors and all the detailing around here matches the detailing of the rest of the storefront, which is part of the master plan approval. The doors themselves are 44.8 inches in width. Obviously automatic. There is an emergency breakaway function where they swing out in the case of emergency or egress emergency. ACM panels, which match the same finishes of the storefront, fill out in this recess area, which is also matching a very similar bay which you approved in the master plan, which is over here, which is Bay S3, which is a type 2 entrance. Additionally, the doors are 8 foot tall, and one of the reasons it's set back is Wegmans knows that one of their #1 areas of customer injuries occurs at entrances, and they typically like to have 5 and 6 foot canopies and things. Here obviously there is none, so any slight recess here is helpful and appropriate. Plus the doors, if they swing out, they will project into the sidewalk area, so helping to reduce that as well. And again, as our comment, it is very similar, nearly matching the other bay that the other door that was set back 3-4 as well. Additionally, it helps mitigate false operation of the sensor, which opens and shuts the doors. And while the recommended setback is 5 feet to minimize that completely, we believe that the 3-4-ish that we're setting these back leaves only about a 7-inch exposure of possible false area on the sidewalk, and people don't walk against the building, so we think that's okay the way it is. Now, if we look at these, show a kind of close-up of that elevation in Lafayette. This is what's there today. This is what was approved in the master plan for this bay, and this is what we're proposing to change it to with our doors down here. So this is a close-up of this area. So it kind of just shows that we've worked very closely with the staff, as well as pushing our Stanley manufacturer to maximize the width of these doors to come as close as we could to aligning with the mullions above. We have 1-inch insulated glass on either side and 1/4-inch tempered clear glass for the doors, again 8 foot high. And again, the color of the Hartford green and the window glass and stuff matches what's been approved in the master plan. just some of the details here, just showing this slight recess here. There's your sensors. All the kind of details here of the panels and the beauty caps match all the other storefront details. And of course, going to some precedents, what you're seeing here in the top row are previously approved LPC projects that incorporate automatic sliding doors, obviously pointing to Trader Joe's, which is a similar use you can see here. And then these are just sort of in the neighborhood area. They're not LPC approved projects, other sliding doors, including what you have at Whole Foods. And I'm sure, as you are all well aware, you know, there's obviously advantages functionally to having automatic sliding doors in a high traffic circulation point like this. So we obviously facilitates an easy and smooth flow of two-way traffic. You know, people can freely approach the doors without being put off by doors swinging out or any kind of backup in that. So there's no interrupting of traffic, and certainly with doors that would swing out, you know, there's no interrupting of cross pedestrian traffic as well. And so they're very efficient. Energy wise, of course, you know, automatic doors are always an improvement, but automatic sliding doors are among the best because they open and shut very quickly and efficiently, reducing energy, heating and cooling costs. You know, as an automatic door, certainly accessibility, especially people got, even if you're not in a, you know, in where you require a disability that requires an automatic door, but having packages and moving goods and having your hands full, it's very helpful and keeps the flow going well. And last, obviously in this time of COVID and everyone being on a heightened awareness of aspects of touchless, having automatic doors is a value, and also reduces, you know, potential spread of viruses and germs on the doors. So I think I can go back to this slide here. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to address them.
Great, thank you very much. All right, and we'll see if we have any questions. Commissioner Goldblum, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks. All right, can you go to the sheet where you show the proposed storefront next to the master plan version? Okay, so what is the height of the where the spandrel bar starts in the master plan versus where is your spandrel? Is it the same point or is it different?
No, it's the same.
It's the same. And you're coloring in all the glass above because you're making it all spandrel?
Yes.
And that's because it's a drop ceiling or something? It cannot be
mechanical. There's a mechanical space.
Okay. And you had shown an example of another bay where the doors were recessed. How much were the doors recessed in that bay?
3 foot, approximately 3'4" and some change.
3'4" from the same crease point that you're doing it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, other questions? Okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions, so we'll move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Sonia Gior to take us through the testimony.
Good morning, everyone. There are 2 speakers signed up for this item. The first speaker is John Graham, representing the Victorian Society of New York. John, you'll be receiving a request for me to join the meeting as a panelist. All right, John, I see you're in the meeting, so please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Commissioners. John Graham for the VSNY. Founded in New York City in 1966, The Victorian Society in America is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The New York chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual landmarks, interiors, and civic art. A master plan governing storefronts for 770 Broadway was approved at the public meeting of September 22nd, 2020. And although the actual certificate of appropriateness hasn't been issued, the public hearing video is available. The commissioner's reasoning in approving the master plan leads us to object to this proposal to install non-conforming storefront infill in this one bay on the east elevation. Commissioners, the design of the approved master plan was based on a decision to make it appear that the storefront windows are 2 stories tall, as they were originally, even though there's now a floor slab cutting across the opening. To achieve this, Julie Rosen of Higgins and Quaysbarth explained that HOK designed the infill with spandrel glass to conceal the second floor slab. She noted they'd selected storefront framing with especially slender mullions and proposed to butt joint the spandrel glass to the display window glass to create a joint so minimal it would be almost invisible. The spandrels all align, and the doors leading to the individual retail spaces are all flush with the storefronts. The proposal does not follow the master plan in concept or details. The doors would be recessed rather than flush, the height of the spandrel panel changed, and additional door framing would compromise the transparency and 2-story appearance so important to the master plan. We urge that the proposal be redesigned to conform to the approved master plan. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you so much. The next speaker is Michelle Arboulou, representing the Historic Districts Council. Michelle, you'll be receiving a request from me to join the meeting as a panelist. And Michelle, I see you're in the meeting, so please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, Michelle Arboulou for the Historic Districts Council. HDC believes the applicant should use the previously approved master plan for the building's fenestration as shown on drawing number 2, sheet A200. Maintaining the line of the spandrel panel between the ground floor and second floor is key to restoring some grace to this building's facade. We question the need for recessing the entry doors. We hope that LPC will work with the applicant to continue the work of restoring this handsome building to its original configuration. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And I do not see any other hands raised, so I'll turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, thank you. And I'll note for the record that we received a resolution from Manhattan Community Board 2 recommending approval of the application. So I'd like to turn back to the applicant and ask if you would like to respond to the comments, particularly the intersection between your proposal and the master plan, both in terms of the details and proportions.
I heard, yeah, Ken Gruskin. So certainly appreciate, their comments and we've, we've tried to work hard to come up with something that we think is going to fit into the design and the character, what was approved, trying to we understand that setback is different than what was approved in the master plan, but we believe that, functionally speaking, as well as pedestrian safety aspects, that there's certainly value to placing it back. And certainly there is that other example of the recessed door that's set back 3'4" on the other bay. So we feel that the precedent has already been set to have something like that. Again, we've worked hard to try to at least make the alignments with the upper windows where we could, and believe that given the balance and the function and the safety of pedestrians and character, that this is a reasonable and appropriate solution.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any final questions? All right, I'm sending a request to unmute so that we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. Okay, Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So motion.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And we're looking at one bay on this very large building that has really three primary facades. And there is a master plan, and the proposal is to accommodate new sliding doors with infill that the applicant has tried to closely relate to the master plan in ways that he can, and I think that the commission, he's shown that the commission has approved sliding doors, particularly at 130 Fifth Avenue for a CVS and Trader Joe's as well. And that this building also has recessed doors, and recessed doors are often common because of the required 18-inch swing that's required for swing doors. So it's not unusual in storefronts to see doors recessed. So with that, Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start this one?
Not really, but I will. I mean, there's no question that the storefront proposed is not consistent with the master plan. And there's no question that it's not consistent with the way the building was originally developed and seen. However, I don't think that the I think that we do exercise a lot of flexibility with storefronts, and we have approved these sliding doors in the past. And I don't think that there's a significant difference between an 18-inch setback and a 33-foot-4-inch setback in this particular context where the building is so very big. I wish the applicant could work with the staff on, first of all, the staff has to make sure that the height of the door assembly is aligning with the height of the master plan line for, not for the doors, but for the underside of the spandrel, and that the spandrel details are as consistent as possible with that, are consistent with the master plan, with the butt jointing and other facets. I would also ask that the staff look with the applicant at the possibility of having a zone of the second floor area to be set back with a partition so that could be clear glass if there was space for that in the mechanical equipment that's up there. The section didn't show anything that would prevent that. So just work with the staff to the degree to make the design conform as much as possible to the master plan, but I can approve it with that in mind.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire.
I agree with Michael. It's, this is a safety issue, as it was pointed out, and it's a minor compared to everything else that's going on in this building. I think it's approvable. Commissioner
Bland.
I agree. First of all, hallelujah for Wegmans coming to this space where Kmart used to be. I think this is a time to rejoice in many ways for our city. But back to the point, I think it's been said, and I agree, this is a minor change from the master plan approach. For a colossal building, this is an I-spec compared to the entirety of the entire block square building. So had the master plan suggested a whole series of separate individual storefronts for individual tenants, which of course is not what it ever was, I'm sure we could have figured out how to approve that and allow a certain degree of freedom. But that's not what's being proposed. And I think what is being proposed is completely appropriate. And again, I'm just so pleased to hear about this new tenant in this really important space.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
I think, you know, the master plan is beautiful. It works perfectly well. And I think it's a nice master plan. I think if they decide to make changes, they should adhere more to the master plan. I think right now the datums are all off. It's just different. And I can, you know, that's why we do master plans, to have some kind of consistency. And if they can make it more consistent with staff help, fine. But if not, I can't approve this. There's no point for master plans then.
Okay. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Yes, I mean, I think it's unfortunate that it does deviate a bit, but sounds like, because as others have stated, of the safety concern, it's important, I think, that we do approve it, and I can find it appropriate. You know, and the particular position on the building is also very necessary. So, as an entry, so I mean, I'm a little bit reluctant about it, but I do think it's approvable.
Okay, Commissioner Holford Smith.
I think in general, the concept is approvable. I also share that reluctance because of the deviation for the master plan. So I would just ask that the applicant continue to work with staff, especially on the spandrel and the framing, to make sure that they adhere to the master plan. I'm not sure if the master plan specified a type of framing, but if they did, then they should be following that. Very thin profiles. What they're drawing now is a little chunky. So I think just close adherence to the details of the master plan would be important here, but otherwise I can approve it.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin. Commissioner Chapin.
You're muted, Diana.
Yeah, I agree that, you know, it's necessary because of the adaptive reuse of this building and, you know, the access issues, and, you know, just work with the staff to have it be as, you know, make sense as much as possible for any future changes in the current one with regard to the master plan. And, you know, the master plan is having to be in effect somewhat altered here, but I think it's approvable because of the situation.
Okay, great. And I, you know, I agree as well. I actually think this is on a building of this size, that this is actually a fairly modest change to the master plan and won't really disrupt the uniformity, but I think we'll make a motion to ask that they continue to work with the staff to conform to the master plan to the greatest extent possible. So I'll go ahead and do that. It's in the matter of LPC 22-05900, 770 Broadway in the Noho Historic District, a Renaissance Revival style department store designed by D.H. Burnham and Company and built in 1903-07 with an addition built in 1924-25. This is an application to install sliding doors. And I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Noho Historic District. And I recommend approval with modifications, finding that all of the ground floor storefront infill throughout the building was replaced with modern infill prior to the designation of the district, and therefore the proposed work will not remove any significant historic fabric. That the configuration of the four-part sliding door assembly will closely align with the vertical mullions of the transom windows, helping to support the unity of the base of the building. That the finish of the doors will match the finish specified in the storefront master plan previously approved by the commission. That the recessed placement of the sliding doors, though differing from the standard established in the master plan for swinging doors in plane with the surrounding infill, will be consistent with recessed infill sometimes found at lobby and service entrances at buildings of this type and size, and that the work will not diminish the special architectural and historic character of the building or the Noho Historic District. However, I recommend that the applicant continue to work with the staff on the details and the design, particularly of the spandrel and the framing details, to ensure that they conform to the master plan to the greatest extent possible. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
I'll go ahead. Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, thanks. And we'll move to the next item.
Okay, and this is the next and last item of the day. Public hearing item number 3, LPC 22-05047, an application for a binding report in the Borough of Manhattan. This is on multiple blocks and lots on Jamel Terrace and West 102nd Street in the Jamel Terrace Historic District. This is 2 sites located on concrete sidewalks within the historic district, and the application is to install historical marker signs.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. You now have control of the screen. You just need to click on your screen, and then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Good morning. My name is Karen Taylor, and I'm the founder and executive director of While We Are Still Here. And I'm here to talk about our Signs of the Times Harlem Heritage Markers Project. And essentially, over 2 years, While We Are Still Here, we'll install 25 markers throughout Harlem to honor individuals, organizations, and events that were significant to the Harlem community and history. Essentially, the 2 locations, one is located at 12 Jamel Terrace, and the other is at 437 West 162nd Street. And both of them are directly across the street from the Jamel Mansion. And whoops, I went a little too far. Sorry about that. Okay, here is an elevation that shows the configuration of the sign. And essentially the signs will be 3 feet across and 2 feet deep. They're cast aluminum, and it'll be on a 7-foot galvanized steel pole. Okay. And there is a design with the narrative on there that talks about Rosamond Johnson, who is famous for writing Lift Every Voice and Sing. He was the composer of that, what's been called the Black National Anthem. And it is actually being considered this week for the status of being the national hymn of the United States. So that's something that the Congress is looking into this week. They'll be voting on that. Those are other examples. The shortest text and the longest text. Okay, the Larry Neal residence. Larry Neal was a seminal figure during the 1960s iteration of the Black Arts Movement, which he was very active with, along with Amiri Baraka. He was a Guggenheim Fellow. He taught at Yale. He taught at CCNY. He taught at Wellesley. He was a poet and a playwright. And you'll see on the left there, that's the front door of 12 Jamel Terrace. And the picture in the center highlights the perspective of that doorway to the sidewalk. And on the right, you'll see the sidewalk there. Now, the reason we had to cite the sign so far away from the doorway, it's only 2 doorways away. It looks farther, but it's relatively close, is because the sidewalk is extremely narrow and we would not be able to sight the marker 18 inches from the face of the curb. So we had to, move it down the sidewalk just a tad. And there is another perspective of, you see Sylvan Terrace there and Jamel Terrace, the intersection there. And directly across the street is the Jamel Mansion. And that's 437 West 162nd Street. And that was the final residence of J. Rosamond Johnson. And you see the context for the sign there. In addition to being the composer for Lift Every Voice and Sing, he was also a very prominent performer and composer at the turn of the 20th century. He was quite famous actually, and would travel between the United States and Europe on concert tours. He was very close friends with George Gershwin, who would often ask him for advice as to how to write Porgy and Bess. So that's just an interesting side note. And J. Rosamond Johnson was also the brother of James Weldon Johnson. And that shows the context on the sidewalk there. And that's another view. And those are the two sites that we're seeking approval for today. I wanted to add some context around while we are still here. We were founded in 2015 to codify the history of two specific landmark buildings in Harlem, 409 Edgecombe Avenue, which was home to Thurgood Marshall and W.E.B. Du Bois and the entire early leadership of the NAACP, and 555 Edgecombe Avenue, another landmark dwelling, which is right around the corner from the Larry Neal residence. And 555 was home to Paul Robeson and Count Basie and Canada Lee and Joe Louis and many other luminaries. And that's what informed our initial founding of the organization. So I just wanted to share that, that organizational history with you all. And essentially that's my presentation.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. Thank you for the background as well, explaining your organization and how it's led to the application today. And I just want to clarify, and Mark and Corey, correct me if I'm wrong, because this is a project or a proposal for multiple signs that go beyond this historic district, and only two of those fit within the historic district, we are, the design of the signs is being reviewed by the Public Design Commission as a whole, and we're only reviewing these two. So we are advisory on the design of these signs. However, we are binding on location, and so we'll be evaluating the effect that the location has on the historic district. So let's see, I think we have some, great. Okay, questions. Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead and just remember to unmute yourself.
I think you've answered my question. You showed many signs in Harlem. Are all the signs, proportion of the signs consistent with this one, or they're all different? Or is this sign going to be a prototype for those signs?
All of these signs are the same. They're all identical except for the text.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing other questions, so why don't we move to public testimony? And if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and we'll start with anyone who signed up in advance and then get to everyone else. So I'll turn it over to Sonia Guerrero to take us through the testimony.
Great, thank you. There are 3 speakers signed up for this item. The first speaker is Shiloh Hawley, and representing the Morris Jamel Mansion. And Shiloh, you'll be receiving a request from me to join the meeting as a panelist. And Shiloh, I see you're in the meeting, so please unmute your mic and state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is Shiloh Holly. I'm the executive director of the Morris Jamel Mansion, which is located across the street from the offices of While We Are Still Here, the organization that is spearheading this initiative to place the historical markers within the historic district. And I'm testifying today in favor of granting permission to install the markers. The two aforementioned buildings, the Morris Jamel Mansion and 555 Edgecombe, are two of only 10 individual buildings that are landmarked above 155th Street in Manhattan. And both buildings are located adjacent to the Jamel Terrace Historic District. And in conjunction with the 50 row homes and one apartment building landmarked in the district, they form a notably unique and historic area of the city. And all of these buildings are located on the former Morris and Jamel family estates and represent the first building forms erected on the site since European colonization. From the front lawn of the mansion, you can see 3 centuries of housing types: the mansion, which was constructed in 1765, the row homes of Sylvan and Jamel Terrace from the late 19th century, and apartment homes of the early 20th century. And decades after the construction of the mansion, this area became heralded for its historic nature and has had innumerable mentions in contemporary publications and local advertising campaigns mentioning the recreation and scenic sites surrounding Harlem. And these buildings in and adjacent to the historic district were always noted for their historical significance. However, the buildings themselves can only tell a part of the story of this diverse and significant area of the city. At the mansion, we are pivoting our mission to explore and celebrate the history beyond George Washington, a former resident of the home, and the Morris and Jamel families. And projects like the Harlem Heritage Markers are essential to raise awareness about the important role this area played in our nation's history beyond the American Revolution. In the last century, residents of the Jamel Terrace Historic District contributed to important arts, cultural, and political movements, including the Harlem Renaissance and Civil Rights Movement. And these stories, which have been historically overshadowed by the accomplishments of others, including the founding fathers who once stood at the mansion, deserve to be shared and celebrated. And the contributions of J. Rosamond Johnson and scholar and writer Larry Neal are notwithstanding, and speak to the diversity and extent of these histories which happened on these blocks. The Morris Jamel Mansion fully supports this project and advocates for the placement of the historical markers at 437 West 162nd Street and 12 Jamel Terrace that would honor these important stories. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. The next speaker is George Calderaro, representing the Victorian Society, and you'll be receiving a request from me to join the meeting as panelist. All right, George Calderaro, I see you are in the meeting, so please unmute your mic, state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning. I'm George Calderaro, Chair of the Preservation Committee of the Victorian Society, New York, a board member of the J. Rosamond Johnson Foundation, and founding director of the Tin Pan Alley American Popular Music Project, which, like the applicant, seeks to commemorate the contributions of, among others, African-American music publishers, performers, and composers, significantly including J. Rosamond Johnson. Markers are added to streetscapes with the worthy goal of commemorating notable events, people, and places, but in helping us remember and mentally reconstruct a historic era to relate it to present-day life, the marker should fit comfortably into its environment. It should not obstruct or distract from the very things we're trying to view. While the VSNY strongly supports the goals of While We Are Still Here and the William C. Pomeroy Foundation, we question the specific design of tall purple metal stanchions detailed according to the requirements of the Pomeroy Foundation's Sign of the Times program. We do not question the location, which is what you are considering today, but we wonder if the scale of these markers is better suited for highways, as for example seen in the Pomeroy Foundation's website, are viewed from moving cars or bicycles. Most traditional historic markers of this type are considerably lower. If DOT clearance requirements are behind the height, perhaps it's not the right sign designed for an urban pedestrian environment, and we would ask the Public Design Commission to consider that. The profile, size, and colors for the proposed markers should be evaluated in the context of other great marker systems already in place for use in New York City. These include Landmarks Preservation Foundation terracotta color signs and building-mounted cultural medallions administered by the Historic Landmarks Preservation Center. The reasons for the proposed configuration and the color scheme for these sign of the times markers should be explained clearly. As they appear now in the presentation, these markers seem to be an intrusion into the streetscape rather than a respectful addition to it, one that we would heartily welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we have one more speaker signed up. That speaker is Victor Edwards. Victor, you'll be receiving a request from me to become a panelist. And Victor Edwards, I see you're in the meeting, so please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Victor Edwards. I've been a resident of 710 Riverside Drive in Harlem for the past 40 years. During my 40 years, I've been an active part of the community, having served for the past 10 years on the neighboring community board, Community Board 9, where the installation and markers will take place. However, today I'm here not as a community board member, but as a private citizen interested in preserving the history of Harlem. I'm very familiar with the While We Are Still Here organization and applaud their preservation work. I know preserving the rich history and culture of our community is critical. As Harlem continues to welcome more and more people of various backgrounds, African-American history should not be just swept away. The installation of these markers is one way of preserving this rich history. Larry Neal, considered a literary giant, a playwright, poet, professor, and a scholar of African-American theater, and a figure of the Black arts movement of the 60s and 70s, promoted self-expression among Black writers. J. Russellman Johnson began playing piano at 4 years old, was a songwriter, producer, singer, and actor. However, he's best known for composing what many refer to as the national Black anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing. Both these men lived in the area adjacent to Morris Jamil Mansion in Harlem. The installation of the proposed markers will forever cement the great achievements of the African-American artists. In addition to the markers, informing visitors to our community of these great men will also provide an excellent learning tool for young and old alike. The drawings I have observed indicate these installations will not impede or create a hazard to pedestrian traffic in any way, but instead only enhance the area. I'm here today in full support of the installation of these historic markers. And one of the things I like about it is the QR codes that will provide information for people that visit the markers. I was previously a guidance counselor at a school right up the street on 164th Street. And we often toured the area talking about the Harlem Renaissance with our junior high school students. So I think this will be a great addition to our area. And like I said, I'm in full support of this project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. And so we have one hand raised currently. That's Paula Yvonne, and I will be promoting you to panelist. All right, Paula Yvonne, I see that you're in the meeting, so please unmute your mic, state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm sorry, I couldn't get on here, so I was doing it on my phone at the same time. So thank you for acknowledging me. My name is Yvonne Joaquin Dennis, the founder and past director of Nichin, which is the Lenape word for our children, a Native American organization serving Indigenous families in the metro area, as well as the Children's Cultural Center of Native America. The map is not the territory. America's habit has been to destroy all of our non-human relatives and then name streets and towns after them. America's habit has been to kill or remove First Peoples and name streets and towns after them. Anglo-Americans' habits have been to appropriate and then take ownership of the innovation of Native African, Asian, Arab, Latin American citizens in all areas, from government to education to art to culture. The colonizing slogan seems to be, "We come and you go." And here we are in Harlem today, the international and historic hub of Black inventions, struggle, resistance, culture, and lessons on how to thrive in a limited geographical region. Close to Broadway, close to parks, close to rivers, close to museums, close to nightlife, and far from the suburbs and the inconvenience of commuting. And another displacement of the rightful residents who built community and history. Harlem, a new colony, where streets like Malcolm X Boulevard will have no connection to the colonizers. But while we are still here, wants to celebrate and preserve the history through programming and significantly markers that chronicle the specialness of the territory and the remarkable contributions to the city, the country, and the world of those who have lived in Harlem for the last century. We ask that you support our efforts to create a city of inclusivity for all and help us preserve the center of Lenapehoking through our markers of land acknowledgement to the original peoples, as well as tributes to African American people, places, and events. Wanishi.
Thank you. And so Chair Carroll, I don't see any other hands raised, so I will turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. And I'll note for the record that we received a resolution from Manhattan Community Board 12 recommending approval of the application. So Ms. Taylor, Ms. Taylor, yes, please. I was going to turn back to you and ask if you'd like to address any or all of the comments you've heard.
I'd like to thank people for showing up to discuss this, but I just wanted to respond to Mr. Calderaro. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Calderaro, yeah.
Calderaro. We made multiple presentations to Community Board 9, 10, and 12. And when I say multiple, if memory serves, probably we made 9 or 10 different presentations to each one of those community boards, talking about the colors, talking about the fonts, and the community boards unanimously approved them. I just wanted to add that that's very important. It's not like, you know, we didn't do our due diligence. It's not like we did not, you know, pass by each community board very, very respectfully, with very detailed presentations, much longer than this one. And so we received unanimous approval for the siding and the sign design, et cetera.
All right, thank you. And commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, so I think we don't. I'm going to send you a request to unmute yourselves so we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. So please go ahead and accept that and unmute yourselves. All right, and Commissioner Bland, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And as I said at the beginning, this is part of a larger program that is going to be reviewed by the Public Design Commission. And so we are looking at just 2 which fall within our historic district, and we will be advisory on the design and will be binding on the location, so our comments can talk about the effect on the location's effect on the historic district. Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start this one?
Okay. I think that it is a worthy project, and it is important to celebrate these individuals and other individuals that will be celebrated. I understand that we're not really reviewing the details of presentation of the sign, particularly just its location. It's unfortunate that the signs can't be somewhat closer to the buildings. And I was actually surprised initially that they weren't going to be plaques or something similar to what landmarks often does for individual landmarks. So I'm kind of interested in others' discussion of, whether there should be, if they have about that, but I'm in favor of the project generally, and I guess I'm interested to hear what any of the other commissioners have to say about the siting issues.
Okay, and I think for us, the siting is more about this particular sign, given its size and design and materials, on a particular streetscape. Is it in front of a building in a way that it detracts from the building? So I think it's less about the content. And while I think it would be great if the one sign could be closer to the house that it's describing, there are DOT limitations that prevent that. So I think the information guides you to the correct address. So I would ask us not to focus as much on the content when it comes to discussing the location, but the physical appearance in the location. Okay.
I guess
Commission.
One other just question, Sarah. Are there? I think there are some other kinds of signs in historic. I'm just trying to think of other examples of signs in historic districts.
Right.
That street signs.
Right. Well, of course, we have the Brown Street signs in historic districts, and we also have the Landmarks Preservation Foundation has a historic district marker program where the terracotta markers, which have the boundaries of a historic district and some of the historic details and information on a marker that is typically attached to an existing light pole. And they are also of a certain height to meet the DOT requirements. And so those are in historic, those can be in historic districts.
Yeah, thank you.
But they are not building specific.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Goldblum.
I don't have any objection to these locations. I think from our perspective, the concern is, does the location obscure or in some way degrade the view of the historic landmark or of the district? And I don't think that that can be said. I think that generally speaking, signs of this nature are good things for historic districts, and that their presence and their modest addition to the street clutter is overwhelmed by the positive feature that they know, that they inform the public that they're in a special place and they should kind of slow down and look. So I personally am very pro plaque, and I think that these are fine in terms of their location.
All right, great. Thank you. Commissioner Devonshire.
I think they'll be an asset to the district. I can approve them.
Commissioner Bland.
I'm definitely a pro placker. I love the idea of being able to know when I'm walking around this great city of very specific and important historical aspects of what I'm looking at. And so often that's not visible unless you have a book. And there are many, of course, walking tours and so forth in books, but not everybody's always carrying around a book. I wish I could be as excited about commercial signs on the sides of buildings as many others are. I'm not. But plaques and markers like this, I think, are wonderful. That's all general talk. Specifically about these two locations, I'm fully in favor of them. They do not interfere at all with my appreciation of the historic district or what I'm looking at. So I think this is wonderful news that these will be not only two in this historic district, but all throughout this section of our city.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
Yeah. I wrote last night, when I walk through this neighborhood, memory and history will blend together in one sign, and I can approve this.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Barron.
I think that this is a really important program and very much in support of more information and signs in general. I do, though, think that in this particular case, it would have been better if if the sign itself was attached to the street pole that currently has the historic district sign on it, just simply on the other side of it, since and especially the one on Sylvan Terrace. So I just think because the pole doesn't help us in any way here, and it does not, I mean, and I don't know if DOT would have approved that, an additional signage on that specific pole, but I think it would have been better to integrate it there because there's something kind of temporary about the current design or sort of everyday about it. It's not dark in color or have a historic profile, the pole that is in this historic district. So I don't know what it really does. And I think there would have been potentially another way to have this sign exist with all of its content on the existing pole.
Okay, and I am not sure if, our historic district markers are installed at the request of communities. So they're not necessarily on every single street. So there may not be one on this street.
Right.
To combine it with.
Right, I understand, but why couldn't, for instance, this sign live, as was noted, on an existing pole?
On an existing pole.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. And Commissioner Holford Smith?
I think this is completely appropriate and will be welcome in the neighborhood. And I think actually having a dedicated pole gives it, I think, to me, lends it more importance. And I think also having it on a pole of a size that you really could have gets your attention is more noticeable than if it were a plaque on the building. So I think this is a really good approach, and I can find it absolutely appropriate.
All right, great. Thank you. So, and I agree with all of the comments that we've heard. I think that this, as the Landmarks Preservation Commission, through our designations, we continually try to tell the stories, all of the stories of the diverse history of this city. And through our markers, we try to share that as well. And so I think that signs that provide this information and content to people who are walking down the street are incredibly important for visitors and residents to understand the history, the diverse history, and to have a sense of pride and pride of place. And so I support it. And I also think that the location on the pole doesn't detract from the architecture of the building or the buildings or the streetscape by virtue of its size, height, and location. And I think we'll only support our mission as well and our historic districts that try to tell these stories. So I think we can move to make a motion to approve. Commissioner Goldblum, would you read the motion?
Sorry about that. Sure. All right, regarding Jumel Terrace, West 162nd Street, Jumel Terrace Historic District. The application is to install historic marker signs. I note that because the scope of this historic marker project is much larger than the 2 installations proposed for the historic district, the commission's binding review is limited to placement of signs and impact on the streetscape. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed historic marker signs featuring galvanized steel pole and painted cast aluminum signs will be installed at areas of plain concrete sidewalk and therefore will not cause the removal of or damage to significant historic paving. That the placement of the proposed historic marker signs will be in close proximity to the row house residences of the individuals being commemorated on the signs. That the two proposed signs located near the northwest corner of Jumel Terrace and Sylvan Terrace and mid-block on the West 162nd Street between St. Nicholas Avenue and Edgecombe Avenue will be seen in context with an existing street light pole, traffic signs, fire alarm box, and trees, and therefore will not call undue attention to themselves, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the Jumel Terrace Historic District.
Thank you. And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
So second.
Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion's passed.
All right, that's approved. Thank you. We look forward to seeing the program implemented.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And that concludes our public hearing and public meeting today. Thank you all for participating, and thank you, commissioners, for your hard work today. And we'll see you all next week.